Live in 5, 4, 3.
We're living on a disk, floating through space, with a tiny sun.
Hey, I'm FTFE. Welcome back to the channel that does to stupidity what Netflix did to Cowboy Bebop. Can you please, Netflix, come here, guys. Leave manga alone. Okay, just stop it, please. It's not funny. I like manga, and what you're doing makes me like it less. Cheers. Look, guys, I'm a nerd. You should know this by now. Anyway, welcome back. So a couple of days ago, me and the illustrious MC Toon decided to take a look at Flatzoid and Sleeping Warrior, talking about gravity. Frankly, I was unprepared. There was something said that blew me away. I always catch myself in this underestimating the stupidity of flat earthers. And I should know better because I've been dealing with Riley since I've been doing this for 5 years. You know, I've done like 11 videos on the guy. And I should expect the stupid, but I didn't expect what happened, right? If you saw it, then you know. But my guest today is someone that is an expert in gravity, the amazing PhD Tony. Hello, Tony. How are you doing?
I'm well, thank you. How are you, Craig?
I am it's all the better for you being here. And I do apologize for what I'm about to do to you because I'm going to tell you what Riley said to us about gravity, and it's going to make you angry. I'm not going to lie. You're going to be pissed, right? So,
all right.
He has basically said that, well, gravity is just a bit of refraction, isn't it?
Okay. I can actually see where he's coming from with that. I can see his argument in the sense that gravity does distort light paths. So I can see his physical justification. But it also, and this gets back to sort of Flatzoid's main argument. What is gravity? Gravity is the influence of space-time curvature on the motion of matter and electromagnetic radiation. That's what gravity is. The specifics of what causes that we can speculate about. We don't yet have further evidence of. But yeah, so Riley there is trying to explain why gravity curves the path of electromagnetic radiation. That's what he's trying to explain, but he's ignoring the fact that its primary influence is actually on matter, on the motion of matter.
So it goes a bit further than that because he goes on to explain how if you look at a boat on the horizon and refraction can move that up and down, that means that there's an acceleration happening and therefore a force, but it's just optical, therefore gravity is just optical. Yeah, I know, I'm sorry. Yeah. I did warn you.
He's well, I can see his argumentation there as well. There's been this sort of notation about apparent forces and apparent accelerations, and in more technical terms, and I had this explained to me by the inestimable Clive Wells, whom I see in the chat. Hello, Clive.
Hey, Clive.
That There is coordinate acceleration, which is to say the acceleration that a body experiences, and then there is proper acceleration. So apparent acceleration doesn't come into it, but that's sort of what coordinate acceleration is. And he's taken apparent acceleration and he said, well, that means that it's what you see, and because refraction affects what you see. It's a completely fatuous, utterly meaningless.
It's taking two different bits of physics, jumbling them together without actually completely understanding either of them, and coming up with something that's just exceptionally stupid. I mean, you know where it's going, right? He's trying to debunk the editing experiment of 1919, obviously. You know,
yes.
That's why we see the star shift, because it's refraction. But to go the route of the reason we see like the horizon move up and down is the same reason we see things accelerate towards the ground. The mental gymnastics involved there to try and disprove gravity blew me away.
Well, it's actually you're overthinking it, right? And probably. Because this is typical flat earther behavior. Their argument is that there's only ever one thing at play. Okay, there's only ever one physical influence on what's being observed. And either it's gravity or it's refraction. It can't possibly be both. Reality can't be that complicated. You don't have to take both into account in any sense. The world is gravity is either responsible for everything or it's responsible for nothing. This is why they're so confused about the fact that helium balloons go upwards. Helium balloons are supported by the atmosphere beneath them. Take that away, they sink. But they are subject to multiple forces, as are you, as am I, as is your table. Everything experiences a buoyant force. That doesn't go away. It's just that we're denser than air, and the buoyant force is not sufficient to keep us airborne, not sufficient to support us. But for a helium balloon, it is. But it's because they go, okay, either gravity works and that thing has to be being pulled down, or it doesn't work, in which case, the world's open. Well, there are actually multiple forces here.
Yeah.
Maybe get used to counting higher than one.
Yeah, well, they usually have to take their socks and shoes off for that, but that's just because they don't know how to count. I try explaining to the buoyancy thing really simply by talking about a helium balloon in a car. Obviously, you put a helium balloon in a car, you accelerate forward, you go back, but the helium balloon goes forward. Because the heavier air is moving to the back. There's an acceleration happening on everything equally, but because the air has more mass than the balloon, there's a stronger force pushing the air backwards, which makes the balloon go forward. And it's exactly the same with buoyancy and gravity. But like you said, they can't understand that there's multiple forces involved. There's one force can create another force under certain circumstances with things happening, and it's too far for them to think. Either gravity pulls you down or it doesn't. Ha ha, stupid globers.
Yeah, and I mean, the fact that a human can jump, the fact that planes can fly, all of this, they do accept, circumstances where there are demonstrably multiple forces at play. They just can't bring that into sort of a detailed discussion of their beliefs about gravity. So it's distressing, but yeah, I'm not as angry as I'm calm. I can live with this. It's just flat earthers trying to make one nugget of word salad explain all of observable physics. Mm-hmm. There are reasons why we have multiple branches of physics. There's a reason why optics is different from relativity. They're not just the same thing. It's I can see what they're doing. It's just it is amazing to me, though.
Well, maybe this will make you
if you'd given me sort of an infinite number of guesses, I'd never have come up with that one.
No, I know, right? I would never have thought that they'd try and do that. But before they got to that, they were talking about how I and everyone in this community that has a physics degree or something is a liar. Because if we really had a physics degree, we would know that we don't do Newton anymore. We would know that the current science is only relativity, and that we wouldn't ever talk about Newton. And the fact that we do shows that we're lying about our degrees and things like that. Of course, this coming from someone who's never set foot in a university. And that...
This is coming from someone who also hasn't read Einstein's paper. Einstein dedicates quite a bit of his 1916 paper.
Yeah.
I'm a bit confused on the date, but he dedicates a lot of time in that to showing that in non-relativistic conditions, his theory converges on Newton. So yes, Newtonian theory is used all the time because it's accurate enough all the time.
Yeah.
Because in non-relativistic settings, it matches relativistic gravity, general relativity, and Newton coincide exactly in non-relativistic conditions.
Yeah, the gravity isn't strong enough and the speed that we're traveling isn't high enough for Newton to be inaccurate. It only becomes inaccurate when you're using, other things that would, that ignore the fact that gravity doesn't actually travel instantaneously. It travels at the speed of light. But because for us, the distance from here to the moon, the speed of light isn't really going to change a massive amount of things. So you could use Newton's laws to calculate everything that's going on, and it will be accurate enough for our purposes. But when you start thinking about traveling much greater distances, going much greater speeds with much greater masses involved, it stops being accurate, and you need to use Einstein. And then even Einstein starts breaking down when you get to certain, circumstances like around a black hole and stuff. And there's still things we haven't figured out. It doesn't mean that Newton doesn't work for the things that we use it for, or Einstein doesn't work for the things we use that for. It just means there's maybe still a better, more accurate explanation. But in the same way, I wouldn't use Einstein's tensor equations to calculate the force acting down on a balance beam. I could do, but it would take a lot longer and be completely pointless. I could just do it using Newton's laws.
The reality is that in those conditions, it reduces to Newton. That's, it's right there in black and white in Einstein's paper. It's an absurdity, and Flatzoid and Riley can claim that people don't have degrees. I work for a university. My job involves modeling satellite orbits for gravimetry missions, and I can tell you that we use the Newtonian formulation all the time. We also include relativistic effects. General relativistic effects on the timepiece on the satellite, and special relativistic effects.
Because that's traveling quite fast compared to us.
Yeah, but when we're calculating the gravity of a surface mass element on the trajectory of a satellite, we use Newtonian gravity. It's and so does every other group on the face of the planet. So this claim is absurd, and they're relying on the fact that not many people do this. But as it happens, I do, and they're just wrong. They're making up shit. And I have Riley has claimed in the past that I don't have a PhD, and my response is, I'll bet Riley $10,000 that I do have a PhD. And as soon as his money's his escrow, I'll put mine in escrow, and we can sort it all out. If he's so sure I don't have a PhD, put his money where his mouth is.
He still owes £1,000 for that bet he made 6 years ago that there's an eclipse every month. It's just over the sea and we can't see it. He didn't do that, so.
Well, this is why I want the money in escrow up front. But if he's not willing to put his, this is one of the things that has actually started happening a lot at scientific conferences, is that after somebody presents a result, oftentimes somebody will get up in the audience and say, "How much would you like to bet on that?" And the idea is to try and get a feel for how confident the person is that they're not just speculating. That they're doing something that they have real confidence can be confirmed in the real world. So it's it's a measure. The fact that Toon is willing to put up these challenges and put the money in escrow and have the conditions there and have judging criteria, that suggests that he is actually competent. But the flat earthers never do that, nor have they ever published a scientific paper, nor have they ever participated in a scientific conference, presented a talk at a scientific conference, nor have they presented any technology, nor have they done anything of any practical utility. All they do is prattle on and intellectually masturbate one another in their echo chambers.
I'm masturbating.
And pretend that it's meaningful.
No, you're right. They just, it's a big circle jerk. And that's all it is. And it's a bunch of morons patting each other on the back for being morons, which gets me all the time. Flatzoid has brought Sleep Warrior on in this stream in the capacity of an expert in gravity, right? He's doing a presentation to Flatzoid's panel, and the hubris involved in that for him to present himself as an intellectual expert in any capacity, let alone in something physics relating, it's mind-blowing. How can he think that he's right when not only that he's right, that he can present something that he considers educational, when he can't even figure out the degrees of an equilateral triangle.
Yeah, it is astonishing. It is astonishing hubris, but we mention it so often that it's become passé, but it is literally the Dunning-Kruger effect. Stupid, ignorant people don't know and aren't smart enough and aren't well enough informed to understand how stupid and ignorant they are. These are classic examples. In order to verify your knowledge, you have to compare it against the real world. And this is what geophysicists do all of the time. We go out and we make measurements of gravity. We use those measurements of gravity to determine useful things about the Earth, what's underneath it, what shape it is. We've got very precise instruments for determining Earth's axis of rotation and the motions that it undergoes. We've got instruments that can detect changes in Earth's axis of rotation as small as 1 centimeter. So, these we can detect the length of day variations that occur after a sufficiently large earthquake. We can detect the Chandler wobble. And its evolution over time, and in fact, the Chandler wobble seems to have stopped for the moment. We have real world observations. They have sitting in a room, throwing leaves. It's nothing. There's no comparison.
No. And that's why it's so funny, and that's why I enjoy doing it, because they make it funny just by acting like they're very, very expert. When, frankly, I still am surprised that there's not a regular report of flat earthers digging their eye out of a spoon while they're trying to eat breakfast. The stupidity sometimes honestly makes me think: how are you an adult? How have you got to be a human adult and still be alive? It doesn't make sense.
I mean, a lot of people say that, flat earthers can't do 2 simultaneous movements. But I will point out that Anthony Riley can move, and he is a bowel movement. So he's got parallel processing.
To be fair to Riley, he is the first person to do 2 streams at the same time.
I'm going to challenge that. I want your definition of the word person.
Right, yeah, okay. Entity.
Entity is a much better. Is a much better a better term. I would even go with culture, colony. Infection. Infection. That's what I would go with.
Infestation of some kind,
Yeah,
definitely.
infestation. That's also good.
Oh my god. Oh, right. I think we should maybe listen to a bit more of what they say, and
Okay.
because there's nothing funnier than listening to idiots act like they're smart.
But the point is, they've still got...
just before we go, I do want to say Flatzoid is a lot chubbier than I thought he was.
He's, I mean, you know, I was a big old fatty, and I understand how it goes, but I did think that he was a bit slimmer than that picture is putting him out. But to be fair, I think a lot of that is the chair he's sitting in, which seems to make his back arch and push his belly out. But I mean,
could be.
You know,
it's an unflattering pose.
Yeah,
but
let's
listen
they
to
don't
what
get to, get to call me fat anymore. Is the point here?
Yeah.
The same value in terms of validity. They're both equally as valid or as invalid as each other. So whether or not the stars are being displaced by the dome flex is irrelevant. They're both baseless assertions that can't be proven either way. But this is what they were going with at the time. Einstein seemed to be more accurate with his calculations. Newton also made the same prediction, but it was of a bigger effect. But the overall point was Einstein was considered to be correct in 1919 with this Eddington observation.
And
this is what gravity...
And now they're pushing him out because of quantum gravity.
Yeah. Well, they pushed him out in 1923, but the point...
Oh, yeah, this is what something else I wanted to mention to you. So they're now trying to say that we can't even use Einstein anymore because in 1920 they came up with quantum gravity, which has superseded relativity.
Well, there's no evidence at all, and this is the thing that's missing. Also, I want to point out that Riley got the order wrong.
Of course,
Einstein... Newton predicted that light would curve, but he predicted that it would curve less than Einstein's theory. And the observations better matched Einstein's theory. And this is the other point. The first stupid thing that Riley said was they're equally valid. No, they would be equally valid if they both made equally accurate predictions. And the fact that they don't make equally accurate predictions means that one is more valid, or one has been validated by the observations, and the other one is invalidated by the observations. So he's wrong from the get-go. He's wrong about the facts of the Eddington experiment, but there is zero evidence of quantization of gravity. There is zero observation evidence. It has been speculated that this is the case, and people are searching for evidence that this is the case. But until that evidence has been demonstrated, we don't know. No. We don't know what the resolution is between the predictions of these two theories, and you know, if you don't have the observational evidence, you've got to wait. But the idea that they're trying to say is you don't have the observational evidence, therefore you can put in whatever the hell you want. No, you can't. And you don't throw away theories that are accurate within certain length scales and time scales because it fails to work outside of that. You keep applying it in the length scales and the time scales where it is accurate, and you search for a new theory to extend it to where it doesn't yet work. But this idea that these theories get thrown out wholesale, that's not how anything works in science.
It's how I tried to explain it the other day as, they say that Einstein superseded Newton, right? So we can't use Newton anymore, throw away Newton, but that's not what superseded means. Behind you, you've got a PS5. Behind me, I've got an Xbox Series X. Those superseded the PS4 and the Xbox One. That doesn't mean that the PS4 and the Xbox One stopped working all of a sudden and couldn't play games.
Yes.
You know, they're still perfectly valid machines for doing what they want. If you want to play the newest generation of games with more fancy graphics, then you need one of these machines and not one of the old machines. but it didn't all of a sudden completely stop the Xbox One and the PS4 working.
He dedicates an entire section of his paper to reconciling his theory with that of Newton.
Yeah, and we've broken down before how you can get from Einstein's tensor equation down to Newton. We've shown the process. It's maths that's way, way, way over my head, and it's probably over most people's head, but it's maths that you can do, and it shows that one of them eventually becomes the other. And as long as you're not talking about relativistic and stuff, like it's...
it's not a I understand that there are some problems with the stream.
I've refreshed it. My hamsters they're struggling. I don't know. It's fine.
Right.
Yeah.
It's sort of the your analogy, I think, is an extremely good one. I think it puts it extremely well. Newton's theory doesn't stop working in the areas where it was accurate. It doesn't suddenly become less accurate in those regimes. It was discovered to not be accurate in particular regimes, so we don't use it there. The same's true of any theory. We don't yet have a theory of anything, so all theories have this limitation. They don't explain all of physical reality yet. So it's it again is a complete misunderstanding of what science is.
Yeah, absolutely.
And again, sort of this gets back to Riley. Since I first met him, has appointed himself the arbiter of what is and isn't valid science. He ignores the pronouncements of scientific institutions, professional scientists, science teachers, scientific journals. He's the one who gets to decide. He and Flatzoid.
Yeah.
And maybe Oakley. These are the people who get to decide science. Well, okay, if you're going to assume that position, what of scientific value have you ever done? What publications?
Well, he did put an egg in some water and add some salt, to be fair.
Yes. What have you done that is so amazing? Yes, Peter Guns is amazed that I've played video games. I do.
I did ask Riley, what his level of science understanding is, and he said this:
I'm a dumb flat earther, and I don't understand science.
Those were his words.
This was nowhere more evident than in the video he did, where he was so fucking smug about flat earthers not having a model. If you don't have a model, you are scientifically fucking irrelevant. Because all we care about is a model that works better than the old one. And if you don't have one, you can fuck off and leave it to the adults.
Yeah, brilliant. But then saying it's a model and they start screaming reification because they've no idea what a scientific model actually is and what it's used for. And right, let's listen to some more dumb people say dumb stuff.
Okay.
Because it always makes me feel better about myself.
Here is that because gravity was described in 1919 as the warping of space-time caused by the uneven distribution of mass, you're seeing that displacement. So when you hear the word Eddington, you want to compare and contrast it with like Skunk Bay, because they're an equivalence. You're looking through a medium at something and it appears to be moving when it's not actually moving at all. Now this is what Craig flutters with. He goes, gravity creates force. It doesn't. Because the thing that you're looking at, in this case, the star behind the sun, it might have moved a midge's dick, but overall it was minuscule, and you have no way of knowing what was causing it if it was even happening at all. Now, at the end...
But it did happen.
Well, for starters, the star didn't move.
No.
Okay. The fact that the light bent doesn't mean that the star moved relative to Earth, right? That's not what the result says. So this entire line of reasoning has nothing to do with whether or not we whether or not when something falls, it's being acted upon by gravity. This is a complete non sequitur. I don't even understand what he's on about. Gravity doesn't have anything to do with the horizon, with watching things. With the optical perception of things falling near Earth, right? The gravitational effects there. If you drop an apple, the gravitational effects on the light between you and the apple are negligible. There's no distortion there, or small enough that it can be neglected in the calculations. So it's simple. It's simple nonsense. Like, he's just prattling meaninglessly at this point. I can't even pretend that he's saying something useful.
No, he is just doing everything he can to try and say, well, there's roughly the same things happening here, therefore neither of them are true because you have different explanations. He's trying as hard as he can to equate gravity to an apparent thing that doesn't actually happen. That he has to just babble.
We've got gravimeters. We've got instruments that can measure gravitation. We've got a bunch of different mechanisms for them. And when I first appeared on one of your streams, I didn't really have that great of an idea of what was inside a gravimeter. I knew the one that I helped maintain. I knew how that worked. But field gravimeters I had no understanding of. But since coming into this, I've studied a lot on how the different styles of gravimeters work, what different styles there are, what their limitations are, etc. We can go and we can measure it, and this is something that they're completely avoiding any measure, any real world measurements of how fast things fall, which is central.
Mm-hmm.
I do not play Call of Duty, Peter Guns.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't really played Call of Duty since the original Modern Warfare 2. Yeah, once it's on Game Pass, I might. A little bit annoyed that the new Modern Warfare 3 is just Warzone reskinned and then charging 70 quid for it. But anyway, that's video games. Right. Yeah. Gravimeters destroy anything that they try and talk about because it can show that at different places on the Earth there is a slightly different gravitational acceleration, and they have no real explanation for that, or no explanation at all. They can talk some nonsense about, oh well, it's all to do with electrostatics, but that doesn't explain why a different mass equals a different gravitational acceleration regardless of the material. And
well, there are multiple things it can't explain. We can also observe Earth's electromagnetic field. We can measure that. So if you're saying that these gravitational observations are due to Earth's electromagnetic influence, then they should be exactly correlated, and they aren't. This nonsense that it could in any way be electromagnetic is just profoundly misguided. There's the idea of, well, Earth has an electromagnetic field, therefore it must be electromagnetics. Yes, but we measure that, and we can minimize its influence on, and we do minimize its influence on our gravimetry. We go to great lengths to make sure that we're using masses that are non-magnetic, that we minimize electrostatic effects, that we evacuate the drop chamber. So it's just, and they don't know any of this, or if they do, they pretend not to know it. They just continue to prattle about the Eddington experiment as though they have a proper understanding of it. And I will say that the Eddington experiment isn't the only experiment that demonstrates this effect.
No.
There was another experiment in 1923 in Australia. There was another experiment some 50, 60 years after the original It's been replicated a number of times, and with better equipment and with more accurate results. So the other thing that I want to address is Riley's use of the term Midge's dick. He says the star moved by Midge's dick. What he meant to say was that the apparent position of the star moved by Midge's dick, but it doesn't matter how small the apparent motion is, as long as it's larger than our margin of error. That's what matters. I had somebody going on. We can measure gravitational time dilation, and we can compare it with the predictions of Einstein's theory. And at the time that Einstein composed his theory, we weren't able to measure this. But now we can. And now we can measure gravitational time dilation over a vertical separation of 1 millimeter. And we do this in an optical clock of supercooled strontium by looking at variations in the quantum clock, the vibrations of strontium atoms in close proximity. But our ability to measure time is now down to the attosecond, which is a billionth of a second. We can film laser pulses in mid-flight. I remember Riley and Whitsett going on about how they didn't think that light had a speed. We can film laser pulses moving through a chamber. Our ability to measure time, particularly small increments of time, is so far beyond what they're thinking of, that even these tiny effects are huge compared to the accuracy of our observations. And it's only their ignorance of these observations that allows them to say this sort of shit with a straight face.
It's their own stupidity that allows them to do that. And no, Tomato, we're not talking about the Eddington experiment where they destroyed a planet so the Maquis couldn't use it. That was Cisco being a dick.
End of the day, from our perspective, it does not matter. But from the Ball Earthers' perspective, it's a fundamental change in their position. Because the fundamental change is that mass is attracting mass, and it doesn't affect light because light's a massless particle, but it was affecting light. So here you've got a direct contradiction from Newtonian gravitation, and that contradiction basically never gets brought up because when we're talking about it, we assume that they know about it, but I realise that they don't know about this at all.
We talk about it all the time, Riley. We constantly mention how Newton's equations assume that gravity is instantaneous. We constantly say how Newton never asked to have a theory ascribed to him. We constantly mention how it's only accurate at non-relativistic speeds and masses. We constantly talk about how Einstein is a much better explanation that's much more accurate. Of course, yes, we do know about it because we're the ones that brought it to your attention, and you've completely misunderstood it. To say that we don't know the things that you are talking about, again, you are the most top left, Riley. It's insane.
Yeah, wow. This is a fairly effortless attempt to win top left 2024, but he's also fundamentally wrong. Newton's theory does not predict that there will be no influence of mass on light.
No.
On the contrary, in his paper, Einstein gives the Newtonian prediction, and it's different from his prediction, but it is non-zero. Newton did not predict no deviation of the light path. That is a lie, Riley. And indeed, it directly contradicts what Riley said, where he said that Newton predicted that there would be a bigger effect, which was also wrong. Newton predicts a smaller effect. But he just can't get his facts straight on this story. He doesn't know what he's talking about on a fundamental level. So to claim that there is a direct contradiction that Newton predicted no deviation of light, that isn't true. That isn't what Newton predicted. But even if he had predicted no deviation of light, that would not make Newtonian theory inaccurate in the regime where it demonstrably works. We have a regime, time and length scales, on which Newtonian theory works.
And they can't get around that.
And is demonstrably accurate. And the search for areas where it's not accurate extends our understanding, but doesn't justify completely abandoning the theory.
It blows my mind that he is contradicting himself. He in one second he's saying, "Oh, it's large." Newton said it's larger. The second he's saying Newton said it doesn't exist. But both of the things that he's said are still wrong. He's gone opposite sides of the scale. And all he needs to do is go a bit to the middle here, and he's got it. Like, he's contradicted himself and got himself wrong in his own contradictions.
Yes, he is. As is typical, his understanding is sloppy. His expression is garbled and confused, and he can't keep a straight story. And this is symptomatic of not having a straight story to begin with. His position is not based on fact. If it were, he wouldn't have this much trouble keeping it straight.
Exactly. Right. Maybe you can explain to me, because someone was asking me and I couldn't really explain it. How does Newton's law predict the bending of the path of light?
So if you consider that a photon has momentum, then that momentum is going to be gravitationally affected by Newtonian acceleration. So that's my understanding of it, at least. I have to say I've not gone into too much detail of this. In fact, Einstein's paper presents his work, but the details of it, he presents his prediction for his theory. He presents his prediction for Newton's theory, and doesn't give a whole lot of detail. I think it was in a different paper that he had submitted that I didn't read.
I'd really like to look into that, because it's something that is quite interesting, because Newton's understanding was literally based on, well, this thing has mass, this thing has mass. It's clear that there's an attraction, and it doesn't really talk about how light would be affected if you just take the law of gravitation into account.
Well, so Rachel points out, and she's correct, that Newton believed that light was a particle.
That would describe it. You're right, Rachel. Thank you.
And this is the point that I was trying to allude to. In a sense, it is particle-like in that it does have a momentum term, right?
Right.
So photons do have momentum. So they do have that is kind of like them having a mass. It's not really the same. They do move as massless particles. I have to admit that Clive is probably a much better person to talk to about this.
It's like talking about using a solar sail, right? Even though light has no mass, it can transfer the energy it has into momentum in the craft that has the solar sail. I think when you get down to it, it's due to the energy mass equivalence that Einstein talks about obviously later on. That can get down to explaining it a lot better, but maybe because Newton didn't understand that.
It's E squared equals P squared C squared plus M naught squared C to the fourth, something like that. But it's so P for a photon is non-zero. And they do have they do apply radiation pressure, and in fact we have to take this into account when we're calculating satellite orbits. Radiation pressure on the satellites is non-negligible, and indeed if you've got a satellite that's in the sun being impacted by solar radiation, and then it passes into the shadow of Earth, it radiates energy, which has an accelerative impact, and it's also hit by energy from the Earth radiating energy. So and we've got our accelerometers are sensitive enough that we can pick this up. In fact, we tried there have been some problems with accelerometers on some of the gravity missions, and we tried using the shadow to sunlight transitions to try and calibrate the accelerometers, but it never worked. Partly because of these secondary effects, the earth shine and the emission factors that we didn't have a good models for. So we weren't able to accurately calibrate the accelerometers. Once they get up into orbit, there's nothing.
Yeah, it's a bit hard to just send a maintenance dude out.
Yeah, that's right. But we, it just, he's wrong on every level about all of this stuff, and he sounds so, confident about what he's saying. And
look at their stick.
Look at Flatzoid. The expression on his face, like
it's so smug.
Yeah.
They're acting like they're having an intellectual discussion, and that's the funniest thing for me is between them, they think they're talking about smart things, but they're not, because they've no clue.
Light's a massless particle.
That is the face of somebody who is so, so smugly self-assured about their own intellectual value. Or it's the face of somebody who just came.
By definition. Now, I don't want to get into whether it's a photon or I don't want to do the buckyballs thing. I just want to point out the current position in science defines light as to be a massless particle, right? Now, if it's a massless particle, the effect of giant masses near it shouldn't cause any effect.
Yeah.
But it did cause an effect.
Yeah,
now,
how
they
can
say,
it cause an effect if it's massless? Exactly.
Contradiction in terms. Obviously, it means that somebody's wrong along the way. It doesn't matter by how much. Just be aware that that's what the argument is. Light's not meant to be affected by it. And then they say, oh, well, actually, it does affect it a little bit. And then you go, well, how does it do that if it's a massless particle? And they start talking about all sorts of nonsense. But the reality is, whatever the light may or may not be doing, yeah, it seems to be caused by the sun, but they haven't got a logical explanation for it, and it's contradictory.
We do. In fact, we have many explanations for it, and no matter how simply we try and break it down, it's almost like it's purposely misunderstood, right? Riley, this is how simple it is, okay? The star, our sun, is so massive that it warps space-time. That's something that's happening. The light that is coming from the star will travel through that warped space-time. That warped space-time will change the path of the light to move slightly towards the star. The light hasn't changed. The star hasn't changed position. The path the light is traveling has been changed by the mass of the star. The space-time that the light has to travel through has literally been squeezed closer to the star, so it looks to us as though the star has shifted position. That's it. That is the logical explanation that we have for you. But that's actually a relatively basic explanation that is leaving out a hell of a lot of context, right?
Yeah. Also, the concept of light as a massless particle is not Newtonian theory. So the concept that... so he's again confusing the two theories. If you're going to go with the Newtonian formulation, you need to go with the strictly Newtonian formulation. You can't go with you can't take an element of Einstein's formulation, plug it into Newton, and say, well, that's a contradiction. Because the theories aren't compatible. They're different theories. They are consistent. The two theories are consistent in the results that they produce within a particular regime, but on a qualitative level, they are different mechanisms. You can't just pick one element of one theory, plug it into another, and expect it to make sense. This reminds me of Spurs chemo. Picking a velocity formula from hydrodynamics, plugging it into the rest of the rocket equations and saying, well, the results don't work. Well, yeah, because you've mismatched your theories. You're no longer describing the same physical system. So and the concept of the reason that Einsteinian gravity deflects light is obviously the deflection of the space-time that the light is passing through. Also, the term displacement is inappropriate here. Nothing is being displaced. Riley keeps on using this term because he thinks it makes him sound smart, but it shows that he doesn't understand what the word means.
There's just an apparent change in the position of the star. That's it.
Yes, that's it.
Nothing's been displaced. Yeah, it doesn't even work in this context.
To displace something is to move it by putting something else there, right?
Nothing else is being put in the way to make that light move. It's not like it is dodging something else that's got in the way. No, I never thought about that. You're absolutely right. Displaced is completely the wrong word to use in this context.
Yeah.
I just want to say I just got a notification whilst we're streaming from YouTube, guys, that my channel recently passed 1,000 members. And actually, right now, we're sitting at 1,036 members. To all of you guys that are members and all of you guys that are gifting members, especially you, Ziggy, thank you from the bottom of my heart. That's an insane number. For a channel like mine with around 55k subs, to have over 1,000 members, that's an incredibly good ratio. So thank you so much for the support. Honestly, wow. Not you, Gary. It's funny that Gary Webenenga is actually a member to my channel, thanks to Ziggy. So is Dearth, actually. Oh my goodness, there's just the stupid it burns, but let's hear more.
If it's a massless particle, it can't be affected by the giant effect of the sun. But it seems to be, and who are we to question it? But it's a contradiction on their model, right? It doesn't work. Anyway, so 1919, so this establishes the notion that something's moving. Now, it appears to be moving, but it's not actually moving. Now, if Craig's current position was correct.
Yep.
Okay. Again, he directly contradicted himself. Something's moving. It appears it's moving, but it's not moving.
Which is it?
In the case of three utterances, you've ended up in exactly the opposite. And then you say, well, the globe earthers have a contradiction in their position, therefore they can't be trusted. You're prattling meaninglessly, man. Anyway. Carry on.
You're right. It's incredible that I think this is something to do with the short attention span of flat earthers. I think he's forgetting what he's saying as he's saying it. He can't recall the words that he's just said, so he says something else.
Yeah, well, I think he caught himself making a mistake. But anyway, carry on.
Oh, Riley.
That's a screenshot.
Yeah,
Flatzoid is flat. Riley is so dumb he's got Flatzoid in pain.
Wait, I am actually just snipping that. Okay, yeah, there we go. Save as. Thank you very much.
And that gravity created a force. We would be calculating the force that was necessary to create the movement of the star caused by the sun. And we would be measuring or calculating that using Newtons. We would not be measuring it in terms of arc seconds, minutes, and fractions of seconds. We would be measuring it in newtons because newtons are a force.
Oh my! You don't measure the movement in newtons. Oh my God, Tony! Did you hear what he just said?
Yeah. So
my God.
Yes, I did hear what he just said, and again, he's directly contradicting himself. So he's going. There's no movement, it only appears to move, and we should measure that in newtons. Newtons are kilogram meters per second squared. So something has to have moved. There has to be a meter measurement in order for it to move, but you just said that nothing moved. So there's no force, right?
No.
It is the most insane and the apparent position of the star changes, and that is measured in arc seconds.
Yeah,
That's the Eddington experiment.
He tried to say that you could measure the distance something has moved in newtons.
Yeah.
Newtons is the force acting
here. There's no force here. The light path is being deflected, right? The light path is being deflected. There's no force acting on the star. It's just the light path that's deflecting, and it's not deflecting due to a force. It's deflecting because of deformation of the space-time, or as it passes near the increased curvature of space-time as it passes near the star.
Well, watch this. Watch this pen.
It is
that pen just travelled about 6 newtons. Did you see it?
It's
oh, it's brilliant. It's brilliant. Oh my god, the stupidity. Oh, and they're here. Right, Tony, again, they are giving a lecture on gravity. That's what this is. You know?
Yeah.
It's
This is, yeah. I mean, it doesn't make me angry. And you're saying that it's funny, but in a sense, it's tragic. There are people out there listening to this, thinking they're enriching themselves, that they're being informed on this topic, and these people are saying the stupidest conceivable things it is possible to say. And Flatzoid is nodding profoundly and and trying to massage his head to fully process these pearls of wisdom that have been cast, unaware that they are nuggets of the purest shit. It's just it's tragic in a sense. On the other hand, I can think of no more deserving individuals than Riley and Flatzoid to waste their lives on this.
Yeah. Me and Toon are currently in an argument because we both want to nominate Flatzoid for Top Left 2024, but I think I'm just going to nominate Riley.
All right.
Oh my god.
So it is astonishing to me that well, I don't think either of you can take credit for nominating these people. They nominate themselves. They put themselves in this position. So I don't think it's saying that somebody else nominated Riley or Flatzoid. These people are putting effort in. They are putting, they are wasting some of their valuable time on Earth to make themselves look publicly stupid, to publicly humiliate themselves like this. Does Flatzoid not have a table? Where is he?
I think he's literally sitting in his living room with his PC set up, and he's like in some kind of big comfy chair. It does not look like a great streaming setup he's got, but especially if he's got to have his keyboard on his legs and stuff,
Yeah.
Okay. But we don't do that. We go, oh look, it's moving, and then we start calculating all sorts of other things instead. But if gravity really was a force, or it caused a force, you would be measuring the acceleration of the thing in question, and you would be applying the unit of newtons to it, because newtons are a force, and that. But we don't. We talk about it in arc seconds, arc minutes, fractions of seconds.
Which is optical.
That is again, the measurement here is of the apparent position. No force, nothing's moving. This is and he's put effort into this. He's studied, he's read, he's gone, and he's looked at descriptions of the experiment. Hasn't remembered any of it. But he's it's just so. Anyway, I've prattled on about this enough.
It's painful. It's painful.
Yes.
That's all that needs to be said. It's painful. And I'm sorry, guys, if you didn't have facepalm protection when you joined this stream.
Fundamental. Yeah, it's a totally optical phenomena. It is refraction. When they say gravity, you should be thinking refraction, because that's all it is. Something appears.
Just a bit of refraction in it.
Appears to be moving a little tiny bit, and that's supposed to be proof of the bending of space-time caused by the uneven distribution of mass, which is the definition that they never want to give. They never want to define gravity. They just want to assume it. But bottom line is, if they can't define it, they won't apply it. It's on screen for you now. You can see it, and you can go back to this document at any time you want to and basically understand it.
The document you've got on screen, Riley, is a list of gravitational experiments on Wikipedia, none of which agree with what you're saying because they all say gravity is real. Let's just get that clear, shall we?
And cross-reference anything I say.
Well, there's another point I'd like to make. So he's doing the flat earther thing that I said flat earthers do before. Light paths can be deflected through the process of refraction. Light paths can be deflected through the curvature of space-time. That does not make the curvature of space-time and refraction the same thing. Two different processes can produce the same phenomenon. I can make a plane fly using propellers or a jet engine. I can make a hot air balloon go up by heating the air inside it. I can make my body go up by jumping. These are all different processes that result in something being propelled upwards. They are not the same processes. And his inability, his insistence, well, this bends light, that bends light, therefore they're the same thing. That is not a valid syllogism. That is not a logically valid step. And that he can't even see that he can't even see the what a 6-year-old would be able to see. The two things that do the same thing may not be the same. It beggars the mind that this is an adult.
You're right. It's the same as they can't understand that two forces can be acting on something. They just can't understand that two different things can accomplish the same outcome. I mean,
that can warp a light path.
Yeah.
Well, there are multiple things influencing reality. It's a matter of working out which is most important in which effect. And he has no evidence to suggest that there is even a medium near the sun. In order for it to be refraction, he would have to demonstrate that there is a medium near the sun. He has no evidence supporting that. And he would have to prove that there is a variation in that medium, that there is a variation in the density of that medium. He hasn't demonstrated that. Like, he's just making shit up and relying on I would call it logic, but it's actually the opposite. An abuse of logical argument to present bullshit that an intelligent toddler would be able to dissect for him.
Dave McKeegan for £5 says, time goes slower as we approach the speed of light, but time also goes slower listening to flat earthers. Doesn't that mean that flat earthers are the speed of light?
No, I think he's sort of mistaking. Time goes slower as you approach a denser object. So time goes. It's the general relativity. It's the denseness. It's their ultimate denseness that slows the speed of light. It's also the fact that when you're listening to a flat earther speak, the seconds seem like fucking lifetimes. The amount of intellectual suffering these asshats have inflicted on the world is beyond measure.
If I had like 1 minute left to live, I know this sounds strange, but I'd listen to a Nathan Oakley stream because that 1 minute would last forever.
Well, it would certainly make you grateful when you did eventually die.
Oh, this is why I love you, Tony. Oh, come on, computer.
I think you know it's there. it's very easy for us to be able to get around this topic, this nonsense. Moving forward to the 1920s, it starts talking about quantum. Doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter whether it's right or wrong. It just matters that it's contradictory to Einstein. But be aware that Einstein predicted gravitational waves. He predicted them.
We just got to quickly correct Sean Hawkins says, but Sleepy, we do measure in newtons. Did you know that? No, you don't measure the planets and things in newtons, mate. Didn't you know this?
No. Nobody's ever measured the apparent acceleration of any object towards the horizon or in the night sky and described it with reference to newtons.
Yeah, because that's not the right unit to use for acceleration, right? That's like trying to say, oh, I'm going to measure how fast this car's going in cheeseburgers. It doesn't work.
So but we do measure the gravitational influence of the sun on the planets in newtons. Though we tend to sort of scale them up. We also measure the gravitational influence of the moon on the Earth and the objects near the Earth in newtons. We can measure this all the time.
Yeah.
It's.
But what you don't do is you don't measure the distance that it's moved in newtons, because that's not the right thing to use. It's like trying to say how far does this thing go? 20 watts. No.
Yes, what we're talking about here is the apparent change in position of a celestial object, and one of the most convenient units for that is the arc second. I'm not certain, and when he says that that's optical, an arc second is a measure of angle. It's a 60th of a second. An arc second is a 60th of an arc minute. An arc minute is a 60th of a degree. So it's just a subdivision of an angle. Angles. To say that that's optical, I think that that's a
dumb thing.
They can be optical, but they can also be physical. I would like to acknowledge the arrival of Desert File in the chat.
Desert File in the chat. What an absolute legend! Obviously, if Desert File's here.
Gravity, you fucking retard! Gravity! Have you ever heard of fucking gravity? Gravity! Gravity!
Legend. Absolute legend. Always honoured when you grace my chat, Desert File. Thank you very much for inspiring so much of the fun I have debunking these absolute morons.
I have to say that until I saw that snippet, I really wanted to do one very much like it.
I think we should have as many people as possible recreate that. And just have a video of just like everyone doing the Desert File gravity.
I think that would be disrespectful. Nobody can do it justice. I'm not even going to try.
No one can do the Desert File gravity. My daughter did a PG version when we were streaming the other day, which was quite nice.
I don't think a PG version is even necessary. But but this is just so pathetic. We're not measuring. When in the Eddington experiment, we're not measuring force. We are measuring the deflection of a light path. I don't know what he's even prattling about with when we see something accelerating towards the horizon. Which experiment? What's your experimental setup?
Boats that move due to refraction are accelerating towards the horizon.
That's nonsense.
Yeah, of course it is, Riley. Here we have an actual picture of the lecture being given live.
Right. Okay.
Nobody's ever done that. When we describe the apparent orbits of Mercury and the apparent retrograde motion, they don't talk about it in forces. They don't talk about it as, well, look, it's got Newton's going in this direction and then Newton's going back in this direction, which is when they're referencing the apparent retrograde motion. They talk about it in terms of how many arc seconds it should be in front and how many arc seconds it should be behind. And they come up with formulas and models for why they think it's doing this. And bottom line is we're not talking about forces, but when we're talking about apparent
Can
acceleration,
you just rewind for me?
Gravity.
Yeah. 29:55.
In terms of how many arc seconds it should be in front and how many arc seconds it should be behind, and they come up with formulas and models for why they think it's doing this. And bottom line is we're not talking about forces.
No, bit more than that.
Okay.
The lead into this. Did he talk about the retrograde motion of Mercury?
The apparent orbits of Mercury and the apparent retrograde motion. They don't talk about it in forces. They don't talk about it as well. Look, it's got Newton's
Okay,
going in.
stop that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm. Yeah. I don't think the retrograde motion applies to Mercury, does it?
No, Mars is the thing that gives us a retrograde motion.
He's supposed to be talking about the precession of Mercury's orbit.
He
obviously doesn't know what that means.
No.
That's fine. But I think that retrograde motion is a phenomenon applied to planets outside of Earth's orbit, so Mars, etc.
Because
planets inside Earth's orbit don't
faster, right?
have retrograde motion, do they?
Right, I'm trying to visualize this 3D. So the reason why Mars would have retrograde motion is because our orbit is faster than it, and it literally passes us in the sky. So it looks like, but it's still going forward. So it looks like but inside, no, it would just make it go straight across. No, there would be no retrograde motion on planets inside the Earth's orbit. That would not make sense. Unless the planets inside us, our orbit, are going around the sun a lot slower than us. I think maybe then you could have a retrograde orbit, but I don't know. I don't think so. No. But anyway, you're right. He's talking about the apparent precession of Mercury's orbit.
He's talking about the precession of Earth's Mercury's orbit, and that's a completely different thing. That's a completely different process.
He doesn't understand.
And it demonstrates again, since this was the primary observational evidence supporting Einstein's theory, it demonstrates again that he doesn't have any idea what he's talking about. The Newtonian prediction for the precession of Mercury's orbit was known to be inaccurate by more than the observational error by sort of the mid 19th century, and it took a long time to figure out what was wrong with the theory. But that's completely different from retrograde motion.
Yeah. Again, they're taking what Riley's doing is he's taking a bunch of different things and just squishing. Excuse me. And just squishing them together, even though they're not really related. Well, they might be slightly related because gravity's slightly involved in what we're talking about. But he's just taking all of these things and like squishing them into one, and then going, well, it doesn't work this way because he's not making sense with the thing that he's describing in the first place. It's so right. The thing is, there's so much dumb that it's hard to keep up and understand the dumb that is being said. And apparently, yes, the planets inside Earth's orbit can show retrograde motion. Just to clarify that.
But I'm just looking at it. But when they do, they're hidden by the sun.
Yeah.
They are unobservable in the sun's glare and in their new phase. And they have their dark sides towards the Earth. Right.
But again, that's just disproving what they're saying.
This direction, and then Newton's going back in this direction, which is when they're referencing the apparent retrograde motion. They talk about it in terms of how many arc seconds it should be in front and how many arc seconds it should be behind, and they come up with formulas and models for why they think it's doing this. And bottom line is we're not talking about forces, but when we're talking about apparent accelerations or like gravity causing forces, you should be referencing these things with Newtons, because it is Newtons that you will be talking about if it were forces that we were talking about. But we're not talking about forces because we're not talking about Newtons. We're talking about accelerations that are optical phenomena. And we're not talking in the unit of newtons. We're talking in the unit.
Sorry. Accelerations are optical phenomenon.
Well, he said phenomenas.
Yeah, phenomena.
But that would be especially pedantic given the overall stupidity of the utterance in its entirety.
It hurts my brain, Tony.
Well, just don't try and wrap your mind about it. Stay on the facts. We do measure the accelerations, but one of the ways of determining an acceleration is by looking at the position of things. So when we measure the position of things and we say, well, it should be here under one set of accelerations and it should be over there under another accelerations, we can look at the difference in position. So, when we use arc seconds to measure the difference in position between where an object should be and where it is, that's perfectly valid too. But actually, this entire subject is about the rate of precession, should be about the rate of precession of Mercury's orbit around the Sun, which is sort of the point at which it reaches maximum, where it reaches its antipodeal anhelion point, aphelion. I'm not a professional astronomer. These terms are not coming to the tip of my tongue at the moment. Professor Parkes would be a better person to ask about all of this. But when they reach their, the point at which the Mercury in its elliptical orbit reaches its maximum distance from the Sun, perihelion is the closest, aphelion is the furthest. So it's at that point precesses, it moves around the Sun. It's that rate of precession that was the subject of controversy in the 19th century. The retrograde motion has nothing to do with the discussion, but the rate at which that occurred was due to the magnitude of the accelerations that it was undergoing. I don't see what his problem here is. Because acceleration influences position, you end up with a difference in position. So measuring the difference in position is fine, but that's got nothing to do with the Eddington experiment. The Eddington experiment is purely about curvature of light paths. There's no forces being implied there.
Well, you said you don't know what his problem is. Well, his problem is that his mother used his soft spot as an ashtray when he was a child.
Well, she kind of had many of opportunities to do that between dropping him all the time
and feeding him lead paint.
But
goodness me,
it's it is somewhat. It is just bewildering to me that he can have been looking at this for he's spent the better part of 5 years researching this. He doesn't understand the distinction between the precession of Mercury's orbit. He doesn't understand the distinction between that and Mercury's retrograde motion. He doesn't understand the role that the precession of Mercury plays in validating Einstein's theory. He doesn't understand the distinction between that and the Eddington experiment. These are three different calculations, and they're three different physical phenomena. The curvature of light around the Sun is a demonstration of the curvature of space-time. We can also demonstrate that on Earth's surface with time dilation measurements, as I mentioned previously. We can measure this with great precision, and the fact that he doesn't understand it just bewildering.
Desert File asks a very important question. I wonder if Flatzoid has inhaled gasoline fumes to off them out of a plastic bag. Well, it's certainly a hypothesis.
Units of basically time, isn't it? It's arc seconds, arc minutes, fractions of arc seconds. We're talking
Stop.
in terms of...
Stop. The arc seconds in here are measures of angles. They are not measures of time.
Oh my god, he thinks arc seconds are time because it says seconds. Oh my god.
That's why they're
Tony,
called
help.
arc seconds or seconds of arc. And I knew he was going to do this. I've actually been sort of waiting for him to screw this up. As soon as he introduced the terminology arc seconds. It's an angular measurement. It's got nothing to do with time at all.
Clive, you're in the chat, buddy. I see you, Clive. You do realize what just happened, right? Sleeping Warrior said that arc seconds are a measure of time.
Replay it. Show that we're not taking him out of show that we're not taking him out of context.
My God. My brain.
That deserves to be rubbed in his face.
Oh, I take it back like 30 seconds.
About how many newtons it's pushing one way and how many newtons it's pushing the other way when referencing apparent retrograde motion. And we don't do that. Nobody does that. It's complete and utter codswallop. So gravity does not cause a force. It doesn't. It's just bullshit. There is no citations that says that. No physicist anywhere says that. Craig's made that up. And he's only made it up so that he can preach it. And at the end of the conversation, he can say that he's won and you've lost, and that you're stupid, and that he's intelligent. It's the force in terms of how many arc seconds it should be in front and how many arc seconds it should be behind. And they come up with formulas and models for why they think it's doing this. And bottom line is, we're not talking about forces. But when we're talking about apparent accelerations or like gravity causing forces, you should be referencing these things with newtons, because it is newtons that you will be talking about if it were forces that we were talking about. But we're not talking about forces because we're not talking about newtons. We're talking about accelerations that are optical phenomena, and we're not talking in the unit of newtons. We're talking in the units of basically time, isn't it? It's arc seconds, arc minutes, fractions of arc seconds. We're talking in terms of how many degrees something moves.
He just contradicted. So he said we're talking in terms of time, arc seconds and arc minutes, but then he says we're talking in terms of degrees of how far things have moved.
Yes,
so which one is it?
Again, and that contradicts his thing earlier where nothing is moving, which is correct. It's the light path deflecting. No object is moving in this. And yes, people do talk about gravitational forces. Scientists talk about
this is a
gravitational
physicist
force.
here, guys. Right, Bridie's saying no physicist talks about it in ways like that. You're wrong.
Yes, you're just wrong. I've become very much sort of a relativist according to with respect to the rest of my group. But the rest of my group have no problem talking about gravitational forces. They have no problem talking about that. So the claim that no scientist anywhere says this is just absolute bollocks. I work in a school with a bunch of scientists, and they will use the term gravitational force without the blinking. And I asked a physicist friend of mine whether or not it was valid to say that whether it was valid to refer to gravitational forces. And his response to me was, it doesn't matter. It makes no difference. Like you can refer to it as a force if you want. You can refer to it as not a force if you want. It doesn't matter. What matters is the calculation of the relative motion of the objects in the system. As long as you're getting those accurate, it doesn't matter if you're characterizing it as a force, if you're characterizing it as simply an acceleration, if you're characterizing free-falling objects as not experiencing forces, but everything else is. The calculation of the relative motion of the objects in the system remains the same, regardless of whether I'm the one experiencing the force or the free-falling object is the one that's experiencing the force. In both cases, it's only the difference in force between me and the object I'm observing that is important for plotting the trajectory of the object, for calculating the relative motion. As long as that relative difference in forces is correct, you'll get the right answer. So this pedantry that that Riley insists upon, most scientists aren't physicists. Let's just put it that way. The majority, I work in an earth science research school. I work with geologists, rock mechanics people, seismologists, whose experience of relativity is relatively modest, and they have none of them. Very few of them would have any reservations about describing gravitation as a force or describing gravitational forces. Now, I've become more careful in my terminology. I will accept that gravity is not a force, but I can also say you will get the same answer if you treat it as a force in your formulation. Makes no difference.
Yeah, it makes no difference, but it's never wrong to refer to what gravity creates as a force. Yes, there's an acceleration, which means that you take the mass and you get the force. In Newtonian world, that is just such a simple, elegant way to talk about things, and it works. Yeah. And if it works, then it's a valid way to talk about things. And
yeah, well, the entire thing of relativity is that you can see an object accelerating, and that acceleration could be a frame of reference artifact. Yeah. That's basically the entire point of relativity. So saying that something is accelerating, therefore there's a force, not correct. And this is the mistake that Flatzoid makes. He asserts that if there is an acceleration, there must be a force. This is untrue. This is the entire point of Einstein's work, is that you can see something accelerating, but that doesn't mean that it is. You could be the one who's accelerating. Uh-huh. And indeed we are the ones accelerating, where we are subject to an upward acting force exerted on us by the surface of the Earth. This is called our weight. And it prevents us from following our geodesics in space-time under the influence of gravity. Mm-hmm. So in fact, it is us that is experiencing the force, and it is the free-falling object that is experiencing fewer forces until it gets to terminal velocity. But
Desert File says that there's no privileged frame of reference, right?
Yeah, no privileged frame of reference, right? And Newton's laws implicitly assume a privileged frame of reference. That's that is the flaw with Newton's formulation, and Newton's formulation remains accurate for a great many applications, as we've discussed previously. But there is no privileged frame of reference, and just because you see something accelerating doesn't mean that there is a force acting on it.
Absolutely. But all of that is far too complicated for them because, they got run over by a truck on their skull earlier in their life. I don't know, something. They're dumb.
But that's not a force, is it? It's not a Newton. It's not a force. It's just something moving in the sky. Yeah. So what? That doesn't mean gravity causes a force. Because if it did, we would be talking about how many newtons it's pushing one way and how many newtons it's pushing the other way when referencing apparent retrograde motion. And we don't do that. Nobody does that. It's complete and utter codswallop. So gravity does not cause a force. It doesn't. It's just bullshit. There is no citations that says that. No physicist anywhere says that. Craig's made that up. And he's only made it up so that he can preach it, and at the end of the conversation, he can say that he's won and you've lost, and that you're stupid, and that he's intelligent, because he's got a degree in physics. But the simple fact is, if he's not able to do that, and I've got the one-way freedom to speak like I am now, you don't even need to speak to Craig. You don't even need him in the room. You don't need to answer any of his nonsense. He just doesn't understand his nonsense, and he's pushing it because he needs to. Now,
Dunning-Kruger in action. I don't understand it, but he does, even though he has contradicted himself at least 10 times during this conversation. It's insane.
Let's call it out. I said that there was no retrograde motion of Mercury, and I was wrong. So I made a mistake, and I'm going to admit it. But the central element is it's not a matter of you telling flat earthers that they're wrong. It's not a matter of me telling flat earthers that they're wrong. Excuse me. It's a matter of the entire scientific community telling them that they're wrong. We have scientists who have studied the shape of the Earth. We have scientists who have studied the motion of the Earth. We have scientists who have studied the motions of the planets, the nature of stars. We've got a vast amount of observational knowledge of things as obscure as the length of day and how it varies, how it changes. The variations in the positions and the brightness of stars, the motions of planet, the arrival of comets. There's going to be a new comet that's going to come into view at the end of this year. It was first observed, I was first made aware of it in January this year. How did we know this was going to occur? How were we able to make these calculations? Why are we able to tell you where and when you can see it? None of this makes any sense under the flat Earth formulation. And again, they don't have a model for anything. They don't have anything that we can compare against reality. This is the gold standard of science. You have to compare your theory against observable reality. That's what we in the scientific community have done. We are right. And if you haven't done it, you are wrong. And it's not, and you don't need to believe me. You can go out and you can look in journals. You can go down to your university. You can ask the physicists there. It's not a matter of one person getting up and saying, I'm right, you're wrong, I'm smart, you're stupid. It's a whole bunch of people have gotten together, chosen by their ability and their training, and they have analysed the observational evidence and determined what we can deduce from it. And if you don't agree with them, that's what makes you wrong. And that's what makes you stupid.
Yeah, not agreeing with them makes you absolutely dumb, even if it's against what the entire world understands as an empirical fact. I just find it incredible right now that he is basically attempting to gaslight me in a way. He's saying that I am just lying to everybody and I'm the one that's pushing the lie, and apparently I personally made up that gravity creates a force. Apparently that's something that I put into the scientific lexicon. And no, Riley, that's what science says. That's what physics says. What the result of what gravity does, however you describe it, the result of it is you can calculate a force acting on stuff.
Provided you work in a Newtonian framework.
Yeah, within a Newtonian world, which I always say is what we live in. We live in a Newtonian world. So it doesn't matter.
Yes,
you can describe it as space-time warping stuff near us and everything, but at the end of it, the world that we live in, the world that we inhabit, the world that makes sense to us, it creates a force that we can physically measure. And I didn't just make that up. I mean, he's given me a bit of like, he's blowing a bit of air up my ass here, saying that apparently I'm the one that's dictating what's science to people. Thanks, Riley. But
yeah, that's right. And it's absolutely not true. And it's sort of you will notice that there is not a scientist in the room talking to Riley. So actually, he's the one who is just dictating, and he's presenting it to his audience as though he's the free thinker who's sort of liberating them. Whereas in fact it's the exact opposite. He's completely inverting the order in which things work. If the Earth is flat and a closed system, relativity isn't a thing, right? So you don't accept the evidence of light curving around the sun. You don't accept the Eddington experiment. You don't accept the precession of Mercury because you don't believe that Mercury is a planet orbiting the sun, being observed from another planet orbiting the sun. You don't accept that. So you can throw out a bunch of general relativity, and you're left with Newton-Cartan theory, which Clive Wells has written a paper on. So that explains that is basically Newtonian, a geometric a space-time curvature explanation of Newtonian gravity.
I need to
It's
read
called
that sounds very interesting.
Newton-Cartan theory, or NC theory for short. But it's that would explain what we see on Earth. But they're using the fact that there exist observations of the universe outside of the Earth to argue that Newton is inaccurate.
Yeah.
Well, if you're throwing those observations away, you don't get to do that. If you're eliminating that as observational evidence, then we don't need to explain relativity at all. Well, we do. We've got Newton-Cartan theory. We can explain it. But if you reject all of that observational evidence, then we don't have to explain the consistency between Newton and Einstein. We can just stay with Newton.
Desert File in the chat says, on November the 18th, there's a flat earther meeting in Santa Fe, New Mexico, with a 100-mile photo opportunity, and then a dinner. He's going to see if he can attend.
Well, that would be
amazing.
He's a braver man than I am. So
right. Well, here's the thing, right, about what they're saying about I'm wrong. No physicist would ever agree with me. Blah blah blah. Right. I put the challenge out there to not just Riley or Flatzoid, but to all flat earthers, right? You get someone on with a physics degree, master level or higher, right? Prove that they've got that degree. Get them to publicly say that I am wrong and explain why, and I will delete my channel. And that offer has been out there for like 3 years. Yet my channel's still here. Not once have they ever got anyone with any kind of qualifications ever to come on and agree with them. Anyone they ever get with qualifications comes on and tells them they're wrong, which they then instantly say, you're a shill, you're a liar, you don't know what you're talking about. So it doesn't matter. So I'm serious. Get on someone who has a master's degree level physics or higher and get them to publicly say that what I claim about gravity is wrong and the flat earthers are right, and explain why. I will delete my channel. It's as simple as that. But they won't.
My argument I would want them to go one further. I would want the master's level person in physics to say that Oakley or Riley are right, or Flatzoid. Just get somebody with some demonstrable physics expertise to say that you're right about any of this shit. And the claim that nobody uses Newtons for modeling the dynamics of the solar system, of course they do.
So I've had a couple of debates with Nathan Thompson back in the day, and he's like, next time I'm debating you, I'm bringing a physicist. And he said for ages that he was bringing this flat earth physicist. And then this guy turned up.
Now that I think about it, the sun, we're told, is a big gaseous ball burning in space in a vacuum. By the way, since we're on the subject of vacuums, fire, the element by which the sun exerts its energy, and I don't care if it's nuclear fission or what, it's still fire, needs what element, folks, in order to continue to burn? Oxygen.
Yes, that would be combustion, as opposed to fusion.
Yeah.
And there are different words. We use different words because they're different processes that operate on different mechanisms.
But this is the guy they brought as the flat earth physicist.
Another example of the flat earther. This is the same. That's the same. Therefore,
yeah. But not only that, but remember, he just said that the element by which the sun exerts its energy, fire, fire's not an element.
Yeah. Well, Aristotle. Remember Aristotle.
It's just like, this is what I mean. Find someone who actually has a degree in physics and get them to say that I'm wrong and you're right. I'll delete my channel. I'll be gone. No more FTFE. But, you know, a simple thing they just can't do.
Yeah, well, they are, you know, they are utterly irrelevant clowns. But let's carry
they're
on.
Fun. They're fun.
Remember, Einstein predicted gravitational lensing, right? Gravitational waves, gravitational lensing, and LIGO's going to come up in a bit. But from the perspective of gravity, right, you can skip through all of this stuff towards the end of the 1900s until you get to the 1990s, right? Because basically, Einstein predicted that gravitational waves would be detected, but that they didn't have the technology to detect them at that time. Well, I could make a prediction that relative density detectors would detect relative density, but that we don't have the technology to do it.
Stop. Okay, this is another thing that Riley doesn't understand. Einstein predicted, for instance, gravitational time dilation. And at the time that he predicted it, we were not able to observe this effect. It took many years. But when we were able to do it, not only did it occur, but it agreed in magnitude with the predictions of Einstein. I think the first observations were actually redshifting of light emerging from white dwarfs. But eventually we got to a point where we could replicate the effect on Earth's surface. We had sufficiently accurate clocks that we could measure gravitational time dilation. Originally, they were in planes, and you had to subtract out the sort of the special relativistic effects of moving the planes or whatever. But you could still isolate it. You could still measurements. And now, as I've mentioned a couple of times, we've got optical clocks with a millimeter vertical separation. It's not just that it occurs. It occurs and it matches Einsteinian theory. You can predict that, if you had a theory of relativity, relative density, and you had any quantifiable predictions, you had any actual numerical predictions, we could test that. We could match them against reality. But you don't, and you refuse to, and you refuse to concede that that makes your theory meaningless. Sure, come up with some theory for relative density disequilibrium, and we can test it against the observations. Einstein didn't just say, we will at one point be able to detect this phenomenon, but I'm not going to bother quantifying it. He gave us a formula for calculating it.
And that formula works whenever we try it.
Exactly.
There's a relativity denier in the chat called Nero Frogger, and I think I might like to set up a debate between you two. That would be hilarious.
Yeah, it probably would be.
Nero Frogger, I say you don't know what a prediction is by the way that you said Einstein had a prediction. That shows that in science you don't know what a prediction is. He says he's not a flat earther, but acts very much like one. Anyway.
Eventually, somebody's going to come up with some other device and say, "Oh, look, we've measured the changes in density causing acceleration," and that.
No. I wanted to mention this. He's saying that we could create a device we could make a prediction that a device would detect the difference in relative density. No, there's no device that could do that. We have a device that detects the difference in mass. It's called a gravimeter. Nothing to do with that is density.
This is another thing. We can control the relative density inside a gravimeter. Most gravimeters are evacuated, so there's no air inside them. So it can't possibly be relative density that's causing the effect, right? We can control it. We can keep the conditions the same. We can keep the relative density of the drop of the test mass and the atmosphere inside the same from point to point. We can do it at the same pressure and the same temperature, same atmospheric composition. We can do that, and we still get different rates of drop. We still get different rates at which the test mass undergoes downward acceleration. We can eliminate relative density as a causal mechanism. It's been done. So Riley's claim here that he can develop this technology, we have developed this technology, we've used this technology, and it eliminates the possibility that he's talking about. It's just a.
When I debated Flatzoid, and I spoke to him about, gravitational anomaly navigation that submarines use. I asked him, well, what would be, if you claim that gravity's not real, what is this submarine detecting? And he said that, well, those gravimeters are obviously just detecting a difference in density. And I asked how? How, by what mechanism is this thing saying my density is this? And his answer was, well, everything vibrates.
Yeah.
Isn't that the kind of reason they use that instead of sonar?
Yes, well, demonstrate it. We've got, this is the thing. We use the theory of gravity to look at our gravitational measurements, and then we plug it back into Newtonian theory, and we say, okay, according to the Newtonian theory, that means there must be a mass here, and we process that into our navigation. Excuse me.
Are you okay there?
Yep. We and I'll just talk while I get a drink.
Yeah, okay. It's the way that they're trying to say that, we could do this, but we just don't have the technology. That's what Riley said. He said we can make a prediction that the relative density could be detected with this detector, but we just don't have the technology to make it. But, I mean, we have the technology that shows that that's not true, so it doesn't matter.
Yes. It's a, it's fatuous gibberish. There's, we have designed machines that can reliably recreate, atmospheric density within a closed system, and we can drop stuff in that closed system. It's not the dominant effect. The density of the air is not the dominant effect.
No.
And one of the reasons it isn't the dominant effect is because we actually, in sort of the super precise gravimeters, I'm moving my hands the wrong way, you've got a drop mass, but you have a carriage in front of it that actually pushes the air out of the way. So the carriage is sort of laser. It's got a distance measurement of about 3 millimeters in front, and it falls down in front to push the air out of the way. So air resistance isn't a factor in the calculation. And I mean, if you look at superconducting gravimeters or cold atom gravimeters, they don't have any air in them. This also cold atom gravimeters are based on a completely different mechanism altogether, because what you're looking at there is the propagation of a Bose-Einstein condensate, where the wave function of the entire cloud of atoms is shared. So the propagation of the atoms is governed by Schrodinger's equations, not Newton's equations of motion. So there's a quantum element there.
None of that is what they're talking about, though. You're talking smart things, they're talking derp. Right, I want to get through just another couple of minutes before I start bringing the stream to a close, because there is only so much Riley and Flatzoid I can handle in one dose. Okay, let's see if we can get up to 35
That'd be called a relative densometer. I used to say it wouldn't, but the point is, Einstein made a prediction that gravitational waves would be discovered. And you can see in the 1990s, it starts talking about gravitational waves and LIGO. And if you look into LIGO and you look at how much money the American taxpayer has spent on it, it's billions. It's literally billions. There would be no world poverty if LIGO wasn't invented.
What?
That is
Holy
absolute fucking
Did he just
bullshit.
say that? One second. How much did LIGO cost? Let me just get that. It cost 365 million. How much is 365 million? So not billions, actually.
Yes.
Of the American budget.
So it's about 50 cents per person on the face of the planet, right?
Yeah, about that.
Is it? No, it's 2 cents per person on the face of the planet.
Oh, even less. Brilliant. Okay, so the cost of LIGO was apparently 0.0054% of the American federal budget. So apparently Riley thinks that we can feed the entire world with 0.0054% of the American federal budget.
Yeah.
The stupidity, Tony. The stupidity.
Yeah. And they put that money to something else, something actually that benefited humanity. If they put it to feeding the poor, 1.1 billion was the initial outlay for LIGO in its first construction. It's had numerous upgrades since then, and we're talking like it's 2-point-something billion now, getting towards 3 billion. 3 billion US tax dollars, right, on LIGO, and it's supposed to detect gravitational waves.
Nowhere near.
It doesn't matter from our perspective whether gravitational waves exist or not.
Nowhere near that amount, Riley. 365 million, and then an upgrade in the mid-2010s of 200 million. In total, it's been about 500 million spent on LIGO, not 3 billion. So he's only 6 times wrong there.
Yeah.
They may have.
I'm going to step in and sort of clarify some stuff. I've looked back over Nero Defrogger's statements, and it seems to have started with him saying that Newtonian theory predicts gravitational lensing, which it does. And I think that there's been a misunderstanding. Einstein did not formulate the Eddington experiment, so he did make a prediction about how much light would curve as it went around the sun, and it was validated by the Eddington experiment. I'm not seeing anything that he's saying that is necessarily wrong, but maybe I wasn't paying close enough attention. He's right in saying that Newton does predict gravitational lensing. But Newton's prediction more closely matched the Eddington experiment, so we can rule that,
he also
within our
says
margin.
that the fact that light bends near a gravity well shows that light slows down, which disproves relativity.
Yeah. Okay. But if he was being rude to Raichi, then just no need to be. It is.
I don't think
there are people who respond to criticisms to by just being dicks. Don't do that.
Yeah, I don't think Nero did anything worth being timed out for, guys. Unless he's being actually abusive or anything that is against terms of service, don't just. It's the same for flat earthers in general. Just don't time them out unless I've told you they're on Vicky treatment, of course. Yeah.
Raichi makes the point. Einstein's prediction more closely matched. Yeah, that's what I meant to say.
Okay. Oh my. Right, let's do this.
Well, I've detected something, and they may well call it gravitational waves, but unless they can give that thing that causes it a bit of a wiggle to prove that it is the thing that they're manipulating, to prove that it is the thing that they're measuring, then all it is you're measuring something in the same way that an accelerometer measures something. And like Bob Nodell found out, he has no idea of what it was measuring. And it caused him all sorts of embarrassment because he said something like, oh yeah, it was measuring an acceleration, and obviously we couldn't accept that, could we? It made Bob Nodell look completely dishonest by saying what he did. The reality is, Bob Nodell measured something, but he hasn't got a clue what he was measuring. He calls it ether. He can call it anything he wants. He can call it Antonio gravitation.
That's why he sat in the position he did, because he ended up doing the same what the ballers do, making a claim, and not actually being able to back this claim up. You know, just making a declaration. In other words.
Well, let's be clear, right? Bob's claim was that if the interferometer that he had picked up a 15 degree per hour drift, that would be the Earth's rotation, because he specifically said we got one to prove the Earth was not spinning. So that was his prediction. That was it. He was trying to see if the Earth was rotating, and it said the Earth rotated. It matched the predictions of everything apart from flat earthers. But then Bob said, oh, it could be the ether, as a trying to get out of jail free card. That's it, Riley. You can't even get what flat earthers did right.
Well, it's also a complete, again, they're completely missing the point. Laser ring gyroscopes are one way of measuring Earth's rotation. But there are other techniques that we can use. We can use very precise length of day measurements. We can, there are experimental setups, where you've got, balls suspended on, extremely strong magnetic fields. There are a number of ways that you can measure Earth's rate of rotation and demonstrate it. So it's not just this one phenomenon. We've got a bunch of different data sets, all of which are consistent. And so what the flat earthers are asking us to believe is that there is some specific magical explanation for all of these different data sets, for Foucault's pendulum, for the rotation of a magnetically suspended body, for ring laser gyroscopes, for length of day measurements. There's some magical influence that will explain all of those away, rather than there is one mechanism that explains all of them. And it's just idiotic. Occam's razor suggests, and you are being willfully obtuse in not accepting observational evidence just because it agrees with your opponent.
Yeah, but that's what they have to do. If it doesn't agree with them, they have to disagree with it and say it's fake, because that's all they have. It's literally all they have. Right, let's just see if we can get through one more minute of them, and then
you held to that declaration, and that's why you failed.
What Bob should have done, he should have said, it did measure something, but we haven't got a clue what it's measuring. And then somebody would say, well, isn't it the thing that they claim it's measuring? And then he could have started opening up with, well, scientifically speaking, we are getting some kind of positive or negative readings, and we're not able to manipulate that presumed cause. So we don't know what it is that's measuring it. But what he actually said was ether. That was his correction. He actually corrected it with ether. Now, obviously, the correction never made it to the telly. It never made it to mainstream. But Bob's going to be basically remembered for proving that the Earth's got gravitational acceleration. That's how he's going to be remembered as per television. But you and I both know that everything that...
Hang on. What did Bob do with gravity?
Well, nothing with gravity. Riley's getting confused again. He's now mixing up Earth's rotation with gravity for some reason.
Okay. This is... okay. All right, well, carry on.
Well, I think I'm going to leave it there with them for today. I'm at 35 minutes on that stream, and I need to save my brain cells for the rest of the day, because it's just so insane. But as a professional that works with gravity, all right, what would you say that their level of understanding of anything to do with gravity is?
Well, I would say that Flatzoid has willfully misinformed himself. He has uneducated himself, and more generally about the process of science. If you've but Riley is just pathological. It seems like he can't keep things straight. He contradicts himself within 3 sentences. He doesn't have the facts down. He's confusing retrograde motion with precession. He doesn't seem to understand whether or not the stars are actually moving and therefore subject to a force, or whether or not there's only apparent motion. He never made any connection to what this has to do with stuff at the horizon. He seems unable to keep multiple physical processes in his mind. And I use the term mind rather loosely in that. Riley seems the more intelligent of the pair, but the more mentally ill. And when I say more intelligent, he is capable of breathing and urinating at the same time.
Right. You might not be able to aim, but at least
which he has demonstrated on stream, in fact. So this is not. I do have evidence in support of that, but they do not seem to understand. You need a theory, and you need to compare that theory against reality. And if your predictions match the measurements, that validates your theory. And a theory is valid up until it is invalidated. Yeah. We have invalidated flat Earth. We have multiple observations that have invalidated flat Earth. We have multiple observations that have invalidated relative density. It doesn't work. It doesn't explain what we observe. I don't particularly understand where why this is so difficult to internalize. Karl Popper said, you can't prove something to be true. All you can demonstrate is that it is valid that it is consistent with the observations we have.
Yep. Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
We've done that. We've done that with gravity. We've done that with the shape of the Earth. And it's up to the flat earthers to demonstrate how their model works better and produces more accurate results than the globe model does. And they need to engage more directly with the observational evidence available to us, because they seem ignorant of a vast amount of it. They never mentioned length of day observations. They never mentioned the experiments to determine Earth's rotation. They don't seem to understand that there's this vast body of observational evidence out there that they're refusing to engage with, and until they engage with it, they're meaningless. They are literally a waste of biomass.
A waste of biomass. I love that.
To be brutally honest, in a world with contagious diseases, we'd be better off without more human vectors. So they're making a poor argument. They need to be vastly more constructive in the way that they engage with stuff. As it is, they're just drowning in their own delusion.
And that's all they're ever going to do is live in that delusion. Because like Riley said there, we don't need to talk to Craig. We can just tell him he's wrong, because I've got a sentence on my screen which doesn't actually agree with me. There's never going to be a convincing them that what they're saying is complete nonsense, because they're so sure that we are the idiots, Tony. That's the thing. They are so sure that I am the stupid person that knows nothing that I'm talking about, and that they're smarter than me.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's something we can ever break out of with the flat earthers, which is why it's always going to be endlessly fun to point out exactly how fucking stupid they are.
Well, yeah, it's the fact that they are stupid and ignorant helps immensely, but they do have this delusion that their intellectual capacity and their educational accomplishments are in any way equal to the task that they've set themselves, which is upending science as a whole. They need to overturn all of known science in order to be right. And they think they're succeeding. They think that that's what they're doing, which is just a testament to the profoundly delusional mindset that they're in.
They keep telling me Flat Earth's growing, but literally at the last Flat Earth International Conference, 43 people turned up. So, you know. Anyway, Tony, I want to say thank you very, very much for taking the time to come on and lend me your expertise once again. I know it's very early in the morning for you there on the other side of the globe. So I appreciate you getting up early and taking the time to come.
It's afternoon now. So actually this started at 11 a.m. for me. So
that's not
quite
too
civilized.
Bad. Not too bad. Yeah. The changing of the times over here certainly helps me communicate with people the other side of the planet. But I really do. I say this quite often, and I genuinely mean it. You, in particular, have made me better at what I do. Because I know you support my channel, but more importantly, you think it's important that I'm right. And if I'm not right, you pull me up on it and tell me that I'm not right. Not only that, but you help me correct my behavior in certain ways. So I genuinely think that I owe you a lot of thanks in the expertise you give me, and also the way that you guide my knowledge and behavior. I really appreciate it.
Well, that's very kind of you to say. I feel like you're getting better all the time, and I've got expertise that a lot of people don't, so I'm happy to make it available to people. And I apologize for the things I get wrong and the times that my behavior is poor. But
Cracker Tony for the win. But I'm going to let you go so I can read off the super chats and get myself to bed. Again,
there was one question in the super chats for me.
Which one was that? Let me just quickly go through and see.
I think IC Spin said that. I noticed IC Spin saying.
IC Spin 199 says, Tony, how do the Flerfs most often explain your job?
Well, I've had one Flerf say that basically they say that I'm lying. One Flerf said that what I do for a living is fraud. That's but they don't. The kindest thing they've said is that I believe what I'm doing. So they suggest that I'm delusional, and obviously that the people who are paying me are delusional as well.
Oh yeah, the lots of money that you get from delusional people just throwing money away, right?
Yeah.
Stephen York for $30 asks, Tony, are you able to take a problem and solve with Newton, but also use Einstein's considerations and demonstrate that both would be equivalent? Would be nice to finally show these cunts why their arguments are empty.
Well, yeah, you can do that. I mean, you can do that specifically. I would. It's basically. I would be regurgitating, that portion of Einstein's paper. It's a matter of the off-diagonal terms in the tensor basically being close enough to zero to be negligible. So you recover the Newtonian formulation. But yeah, you could do that. Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, I think that is all the super chats specifically for you, Tony. Just double check. Yeah. So again, I really, really, really appreciate you taking your time to come and speak to me. I genuinely love having you on because I get better at what I do whenever you're here. And just thank you in general for being a part of this community.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
No worries.
And sorry for all of my hesitations and ums and ahs.
No worries. I hope you have a good rest of your day.
You too.
Speak
Bye,
later.
Craig.
Bye. There is PhD Tony, guys. If you click in the title, if you click on his name, it will take you to his channel. And I'd appreciate it if everyone watching, if you're not already subscribed, you please drop Tony a sub. That'd be a great help. Again, if you look in the title where I've tagged his name, you click on his name. It says at PhD Tony _original. You click on that, it will take you straight to his channel, which you can then drop a sub, and that'd be brilliant. We still got about 45 minutes of this stream to get through. So I will be continuing it. Sorry in advance. And as always, a stupid amount of support from you guys. Jiffy Jiffworld for $2 says, I am Groot. Well, I am Groot. And then Jiffy Jiffworld gifts 25 memberships, which is freaking awesome because, like I said earlier, we passed 1,000. And right now we are 1,041 members on this channel, which is fucking insane. Icy Spin White $199 says, I'm here for the evidence. Am I in the right room? Yes, because me and Tony were here. Not when there's flat earthers, though. Tim Davison for $2 says, I don't do Newtons. I'm not a necro. Mancer. Budumch. Orange Rob for $5 Australian says, FE can't provide an example of a pressure gradient in an enclosed system. Flat earther can't tie shoelaces, so that might be a slight problem. Tim Davison for $5 says, Newton is a crescent wrench. Einstein is an adjustable. You use the tool you need. Duh. Adjustable wrenches are fucking awful, by the way. Like, literally, just don't use adjustable wrenches. They cause problems, okay? If you're an engineer, you know what I mean. Jiffy Jiffroll for $5 says, how do you hide money from a Flerf? Put it in a science textbook. No, because they just burn that for like heat or something because they can't figure out the central heating. Copper in Quarter for a member for 6 months says, a wise man once said, not the kind you rinse out from your mum's gums. I'm that wise man. Wise mum? I'm not a wise mum, I'm a wise man. And then Mr. E-Man gifted another 5 memberships, bringing us up to 35 for the stream. Thank you very much. Jiffy Jeffwell, $2 says, can't get a master's degree from a curved surface. No, absolutely not. Wait, what? Lord Luminous Pooh for $2 says, don't remove the cork from the fork ruck pick. I don't know what you mean by that, but thank you for the $2. Icy Spin for $199 says, Toon's law should be canon, yet to be disproven. They fucking are canon, mate. 100%. Draco Fire, my gym bro, for $5 says, Flatzoid is currently minus 255 to win DFOTY. Other odds have Sleepy Warrior at plus 145, Nathan Thompson at plus 300, and Oakley at plus 500. Place your bets. Yeah, fuck it. I'm nominating Riley. Alright, Toon can have Flatzoid. I'm nominating Riley. Lord Luminous Pooh for $10 says, after watching every video, you can fight the end boss of YouTube, but be warned, once you beat him, you must take his place. I found that out after. Who wants to fight Lord Luminous Pooh? I completed YouTube personally. Icy Spin 199 says, the tech for the PS2 was destroyed. Yeah, exactly. Except we made the PS2 Mini. So, Lord Luminous Pooh for $2 says, into a Warhammer first-person shooter on Game Pass started today. Yeah, I'm going to give that a go. It's a multiplayer type thing though, right? I want a really good single-player Warhammer game. I know there's one coming, actually. Randomly Epic for $5 says, when did Riley come back and who let him? Yeah, he popped back about a month ago, spouting the dumb. Fact-based member for 5 months, thank you very much, says, I used 15 accounts to get blocked by all of them for asking tough questions. Yeah, if you ask questions in Flat Earther streams, you do get blocked because they like their old, echo chambers. Cal, who's been a member for 5 months, says, looking good, FTFE. Well, thank you, sir. I am working out 6 days a week. Look at this. Look at those. Like, where did that actually come from? Yeah, that's a real bicep, guys. No jack in here. Just, even my shoulders looking, like, strong. Oh, what are we on tomorrow? Back and chest. It was rest day today. It was arms and chest Friday, so on to back and shoulders tomorrow. And I'm really working at that, getting that pull-up. No, it's not like that. When you're doing pull-ups, don't grip the bar like that. You need to grip your hand over the top. I'm working. I'll record one. Cal, member for 5 months, says, looking good, FT, thank you. OG Yeti gifted another 5 memberships. Thank you very much. 35 today. That's insane. Jay Walkin, member for 1 month, says, I just passed my first month thanks to Ziggy. I'm proud to be part of the FTFE fanboys. Initiate code FT469. Right, please stop activating these codes, guys. They give me headaches, okay? But thank you for being a member, and I sincerely hope that you re-up. Guys, if you have been gifted a membership and you want to continue that, then all you need to do is just agree with YouTube for it to recharge you that $4.99 a month, and you will always support this channel. The fact that I'm above 1,000 members is mind-blowing. Huge Arse, $2.99 says, Flatzoid plus Riley equals a singularity of dumb. I am surprised there's no black holes. Dave McKeegan for £5 says, time goes slower as we approach the speed of light. Time goes slower. Listen to Flat Earthers doesn't mean Flat Earthers are speed light. No, it just means Flat Earthers are fucking dense. Randy Lehay for $2 says, Newtons seek their own level. Is it Lehay? Is that right? I'm trying to get your name right. I'm sorry if I didn't. Bill Tetley for $5 says, I'll super chat $20 if you can get your daughter on to do the PG Gravity. Unfortunately, it is 2 a.m. and she is sleeping, so instead you can have the original.
Gravity, you fucking retard! Gravity! Have you ever heard of fucking gravity? Gravity! Gravity!
Argumentson for 750 ISK says there is going to be an eruption close to my town in the next few days. How do we know? Science, of course. Stephen York for $30.99 Australian. Tony, are you able to make... I read that one. If you hit me up on Discord, I'll actually link you the paper that shows you how to do that. Janos Takas for 1024 Huff says, wisdom of astrology. Is it okay to cut hair during Mercury retrograde? Mercury retrograde is not a good time to initiate anything, including new hairstyles. It's a good thing that astrology is a load of bollocks then, huh? Although I do need a haircut. It's getting a bit long. Mr. Eman, $5 Australian says, I cannot wait for Riley to apply the laws of refraction to calculate the orbit of the moons of Jupiter. It's just a bit of refraction, isn't it? Tony Regime for 5 months has been a member and says, have you heard about the new species of frog discovered in Australia? It has a very long neck, so they called it the camel toad. That's cool. Camel toad. Boonch. Randy Lay for $5 says, does Flats think that fearless is slang for crack? I mean, I know English isn't his first language. Randy also says to watch the Trailer Park Boys. It's on my list, honestly. I just don't get much time for TV. Bill Tetley for $20 says, hey, fight the flat shirt, you sexy beast. I'm out east for dinner. Here's the $20 anyway. Thank you for making me a mod. No worries. Thank you for being a channel supporter. Brianna Johnson, who's been a member for 4 months, says, happy duo. Anyone who celebrates the Festival of Lights, have fun. Absolutely. Axis Arkham, who's been a member for 1 month, says, first time here, FTFE. MC Toon sent me, loving your channel. Keep up the good work. Welcome, my friend. Welcome to the Madhouse. Rachbot, my favourite bot, says for $5 Australian, smash that like button or the Borg will be coming with the AI uprising. No. Anyway, it's easy to beat the Borg. Just keep, cycling the frequency of your phaser. It's easy. You got to invent a phaser first, of course, but, yeah, we're fucked if the Borg come. Lord of Luminous Pooh for $2 says that he has made me worse. No, all of you have also made me better. Not you, Gary. Bill Tetley for $5 says NASA authorization code 1 Romeo 3 Sierra 3 Tango 6942. Ooh. Shit, am I live? Oh. Bill, I've told you not to bloody do that, mate. Icy Spin for $2 says, I can't see because there's a thing where I believe in airplanes. Yes, I do also. I believe that airplanes in the night sky are like shooting stars. Jay walk in for €2.49 says move Trailer Park Boys up on your list. It rocks. Okay, fine. The wife and I will watch Trailer Park Boys. Okay, after we've finished rewatching all of Star Trek: The Next Generation. We're currently at season 3, episode 11. Riker, right? Anyway, guys, thank you very much for being here tonight. A special thank you to PhD Tony. And again, if you click his name in the title, you can go and subscribe to his channel. Please, please, please go and do that. But, the important questions of the day, can we pretend airplanes in the night sky are like shooting stars?
Can we pretend that airplanes in the night sky are like shooting stars? Should be wishing for a brain right now, brain right now, brain right now.
Good morning. These words come with a storm warning. Better batten down the hatches, grab some matches and brace yourself for a long day of misery. YouTube has given me the power to reach up into the sky and show you all that we live on the ball. I bring you science that's comprehensible. Your view is indefensible. You're reprehensible. Go on, Mr. Sensible. When I was young, I never thought I would be here to see this. A pile of random nonsense dressed up as bullshit. Your ignorance will be the death of us all, like running head first, full speed into a wall. You could always read a book, buy a telescope, set it up and take a photo of the moon, or just be a buffoon. I send you in a balloon up to the stratosphere on page 3.
You're a few fries short of a happy meal. You're dumber than a box of hair. The Wheel spinning but the hamster's dead, and you're as smart as bait. You forgot to pay your brain bill, you're missing a few buttons on the remote control. 24 cents short of a quarter, you're surfing in Nebraska. You're as bright as Alaska in December, and you fell out of your family tree. You don't have all the cornflakes in one box, you got an IQ of 2 and it takes 3 to grunt. The elevator doesn't go all the way up, and there's a vacancy on the top floor. Your antenna doesn't pick up all the channels, you're several nuts short of a
You're Mr.
fruitcake.
Sensible, calm down, don't go too hard. You don't need the hard to burying Flerfs in your backyard. You're a man of science, poise and grace. Mage 2 did everything to wipe the grins off the face. So Nathan, get away from those kids. The world is not flat and it doesn't have a lip. Recognise the differences between the textbook and the Bible and control yourself. Lay off your slander and your lies. You're a bunch of knobs poisoning the well of the youth, spreading lies that you like to claim as knowledge and truth. Stop spreading fresh bullshit like the butter on your bread. Maybe a musical assault and knock some sense into your head. I hope one day you'll hear these lyrics and smile, and you realise you used to be a 40-year-old child. Now it's time to wake up, open your eyes and see, and acknowledge the existence of
Gravity! You're a few clowns short of a circus, your phone is off the hook. Your sewing machine is out of thread, you're all foam and no beer. You don't have all your dogs on one leash, an intellect rivaled only by garden tools. There's no grain in your silo, and your skylight leaks a little. Your belt doesn't go through all the loops. You couldn't pour water out of a boot without instructions on the heel. Your slinky's kinked, and you're proof that evolution can work in reverse. A few feathers short of a whole duck, one fruit
Can we
short of
pretend
a
that
full bowl.
airplanes in the night sky are like shooting stars? Should be wishing for a brain right now, brain right now, brain right now. Can we pretend that airplanes in the night sky are like shooting stars? Should be wishing for a brain right now, brain right now, brain right now.
You thought it was over? Well, I'm still standing while you're swinging, flinging feces, talking shit just like the human centipede. You got the mind of a chimp, and I'm here to expedite your shore leave. Cause I'm a seaman, but not the kind I rit up on your mum's gums. I'm the kind that sailed submarines and fired guns. I could float a boat across the ocean with my eyes closed, circumnavigate the globe with a compass and a bag of sausage rolls. Well, all you can do is nibble on your toes. I'll smack you with the hose that you call a water level, sit and swivel. You nasal gazing muppet, you can stuff it harder than the wallet stuffed by Warren Buffett. And I don't care about your sauces unless you're serving them, and I don't care about your lines unless you're curving them. Now step away from me, you're sucking up my oxygen with the vacuum where your brain should be, you dumb fuck. Hey guys, well thank you very much for tonight. It's been an excellent stream. Again, thank you to PhD Tony. I'll be back tomorrow, and then probably Monday finishing this off. Riker, say hello. Come on, say hello. That's right. Say hello. It's Commander Riker, guys. Look how big he's getting, eh? Thank you very much for being here. I really appreciate all the support. You know, it's just mind-blowing the level of support you give me, guys. 1,046 members. Anyway, see you tomorrow. In the meantime, remember, stupidity is not a right. Fight the flat. 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 Fight the flat.
I'm a dumb flat earther, and I don't understand